Let's get to the news. Let's get into the roundup for this week. So first on the docket, we have to talk about FTX, which recently imploded in the financial markets following the midterm election last week. There are 1 million moving parts to this story, and it's still developing. So I can't go into exhaustive details, but just know that it is a dumpster fire. It's amazing, and it looks really, really bad for Democrats in particular. And so there's a kind of a lot to unpack here. I'll just kind of mention a select number of areas. One is there's this kind of incestuous relationship between FTX, which is now bankrupt, and the SEC. And that comes through sort of a mutual contact. This Sam Bankman-Fried person was the second largest donor to the Democrats. He gave like $40 million to them, planned to give billions more in the future. His parents were Democrat operatives, very well connected in Washington, D.C. Sam got rich really off of his sort of trite left-wing talking points, and that was like a very effective marketing tool for him. His organization's ESG score was actually higher than Exxon's. So think about this. A firm started in 2019 after Joe Biden sort of announced his candidacy for the White House. So 3 years of history basically is somehow better governed according to the ESG powers that be than ExxonMobil of all places. Despite tons and tons of red flags, which are being uncovered now and will continue to come up. Sam was the darling of the World Economic Forum, WEF, which is headed by Klaus Schwab, who's the son of a Nazi and very much a globalist figure. Sam's brother used to work for a member of the House Financial Services Committee. And it's just been again, a dumpster fire. There's a crazy connection between FTX and Ukraine. Ukraine's kind of set up a sort of a crypto fund based upon or in partnership with FTX, poured billions of dollars into that sort of FTX exchange donation fund. And then that money went back into Democrat pockets. And so that's money that I would assume is over and above the original $40 million that Sam gave directly. There's like this almost like hidden or laundered money that is sort of unaccounted for through that. He had something interesting on his balance sheet, apparently, according to this kind of investor with Hall & Cedar, and it was something called Trump Lose, right? So I guess this was like a token or something like that he specifically made as almost like a meme, just dreaming or fantasizing about Trump losing. Several of Sam's associates are believed to have deep connections with the Clintons and or Epstein Island. We know that Sam himself was featured on panels with Bill Clinton himself many times. He was really a darling of the mainstream media. He got a fluff piece in the New York Times and the Washington Post not too long ago, actually just within the past week, even after all this sort of drama unfolded. He's involved, sexually with his sort of kind of leadership team, apparently. So not just his girlfriend, but they used to do sort of wild parties, I guess, in the Bahamas. How's that for a planning and sort of governance meeting? And I guess there's actually threats of maybe an employee like leaking those tapes out. So it's really, really crazy. The one thing that I wanted to highlight as kind of a focal point, though, is this exchange that Sam had with Vox Media. So apparently, Vox, they messaged him. They're like, hey, you were really good at talking about ethics when you spoke with us for someone who kind of saw it all as a game with winners and losers. And Sam is like, yeah, I had to be. It's what reputations are made of to some extent. I feel that bad for those who got effed by it. But this dumb game we woke Westerners play where we say all the right shibboleths or shibboleths, and so everyone likes us. This is probably one of the most inflammatory kind of mask off situations. Up until now, Sam has been pretty apologetic and kind of, semi-professional in terms of his communications and, et cetera, after kind of disappearing and I guess trying to flee the country or what have you. And he may or may not be captured in the Bahamas right now. I'm not sure. I've heard conflicting reports about whether or not he's free or whether he's actually under custody by the feds or COINTELPRO. Not sure. But anyway, This is a mask off moment where he's like, look, I just said whatever it took to scam you guys, you know? So, I'll say all the, the trite buzz points and talking points, climate change, altruism, you will own nothing and be happy. We have to protect democracy. I'm actually in favor of regulating the crypto market. Don't you see? I'm a team player. And other sort of democratic sort of talking points that make one seem virtuous and like worthy of giving resources to. And I had to actually look this up. Shibboleth, right? So like it's basically kind of an in-group formation term. So sort of a new knowledge point for me. But it's when you kind of like, based on what you say, you can almost figure out what groups you're a part of and what groups you're not part of, right? So if I say Sabbath, for example, just casually in my like speech, you might think I'm like either like a Jew or someone practicing Judaism or like a Christian, right? Because like people don't just casually going around saying that. If my pronunciation is like kind of more Southern, you're gonna say, oh, I have something in common with that person. Let's say you're using jargon that's like specific to like Democratic talking points, climate change, Green New Deal, just stop oil. We have to glue ourselves to paintings and block roads and all this. As long as you kind of drop and kind of season your language with whatever the in crowd is demanding, you'll get accepted, right? If I can say, hey, I spent some time, going to the Himalayas last week, went on a hike or, some mountain climb. Oh man, me too. Shared experiences, right? So it's just a way of really like, going to the Democrats, going to the mainstream media and saying, hey, look, guys, I'm one of you. Please accept me. Inside jokes, right? Let's make a joke about January 6th, and the assault to democracy. Like, you just need to make people comfortable that you are like them, you are not an other, okay? Right? If, social status, if you can do it like, what Drake does in a lot of his songs and just name like various brands and things that nobody else would recognize, like a normal person who maybe shops at Walmart or Target, then that's how you can show, Balenciaga. I had to look up what Balenciaga was after, I guess, Kanye got his ties severed with that company, right? It's just a way of kind of just like showing what group you belong to. So that's what he did, and he's admitting it. He's admitting that I can just talk the talk, and people will think I'm one of them, and that's how I'm going to get their money. And it worked. We'll see if anything actually comes from this. To be honest with you, something that my take is that systemic failure cannot be dealt with systematically, right? Because the only way for it to get dealt with systematically is that you have to throw out the entire like system, right? So given this sort of just like capitalistic orgy here, between so many different forces, I just don't see a systematic sort of change happening. Everybody would need to do soul searching and mass modification. And I don't think that that's going to happen. They're going to find a scapegoat if anything happens, if anything, and nothing may happen. It's going to be a scapegoat situation where they find someone to blame. It might be Sam, might be someone else. Looking like it might be Sam, the I guess now former CEO. I think he got fired. And then they just kind of wash their hands and they're done with it. Okay, so ultimately going to move this to S tier. I almost want to make it like SS tier. It's just that critical. Has massive implications on our government, our form of law, our business community, the crypto community, academia, and investors. I mean, just so many different threads here. Foreign policy, Ukraine. It's just unbelievable, right? Kind of the Jussie Smollett meets Zelensky. I think if you take Jussie Smollett and you smash him with Vladimir Zelensky in Ukraine, you get somebody like that Sam character. How can I grift as hard as possible and get everyone to sympathize with me so that I can get away with literal murder? Okay, so next story. There's this girl, fairly cute, who basically just showed up at her dad's funeral not too long ago and described her dad as racist, misogynistic, xenophobic Trump supporter. She describes herself, in fact, as a black supremacist, and attacked her dad at his own funeral. So just a crazy story. She looks like she's half white, half black. So her father is white, her mother is black. Seems to be the case, and she's just hating on her dad in every way, shape, and form. Really tragic to see. I won't spend too much time on talking about this young lady, besides pointing out one thing, which is I'm not like well versed in every aspect of history, but one thing that I remember is like sort of Pol Pot and the kind of communist revolution, I believe in Cambodia, and one thing that they did was brainwash the children. So the main way that one of the main ways that communists win in any country historically, and why communism is responsible for the deaths of more people in a century than I think at any point in the history of the world. I think, upwards of 100 million deaths in the 20th century alone, is because of their strategy. And one of the very, very, very effective strategies is to take the children, corrupt their minds, and then divide them amongst their parents. It's very effective because you are influencing not only your present enemy, which would be the parent, but your future potential enemy, which would be the child, if the child was allowed to sort of be a normal person. And so now, I mean, it's a much more effective strategy. It's almost like instead of just defeating your enemy, you can actually convert them. So think of it like a house race. If you like a flip in a house race is much more powerful than just like an incumbent winning, who happened to be on your side, because a flip is almost like you scored 2 points, So that's kind of how it is here. Like, the communists go after the kids, and it's a huge win if they can get the kids to basically hate their parents and to sell them out. Once you've done that, you are, that's not that's checkmate material right there. I'm gonna move this into the A category ultimately. All right. So the next one is we have to talk about Donald Trump. Donald Trump. So this is actually my first time logging into Truth Social. I'm actually not even logged in. I just went to see this post specifically. So Donald Trump is like pulling a Kanye West right now. He's just gone off the rails, and but really, instead of losing financial capital, you might say, he's been losing social capital in a major way amongst his supporters. And so this has sparked what many have been referring to as kind of the GOP civil war. And a lot of this came out of the midterms. I was going to bring up the midterms in a minute, but, spoiler alert, it was a disaster. Well, I'll caveat that. It was a disappointment. It wasn't a disaster. So a disaster, just to kind of play off my last video, which was about the Uchiha massacre. A disaster would have been we don't win the House, we don't win the Senate, and we lose virtually every main major election. But that didn't happen. We at least won, and I had to wait to make this video. We at least won the House, which is a good deal. So now Nancy Pelosi's gone, and we get to do all this stuff in the House. So it's not a complete disaster. But anyway, going back to the main point is Trump's been on one. He's been going after Ron DeSantis. He's been going after Glenn Youngkin, Winsome Sears, Candace Owens. We just recently learned, I guess that would happen earlier in the year. And, there seems to be two major kind of issues going on. Not only, is he going after these folks, but he underperformed in the midterms from what we can tell. And his candidates, I think Lauren Boebert, she's like barely hanging on to her lead there. Joe Kent, he lost his race. Dr. Oz in Pennsylvania lost his race. So it's been tough. Blake Masters, who was also with Trump, he lost his race. What's the name? J.D. Vance did win his race, fortunately. So it's been kind of a mixed bag. So again, not a terrible defeat overall, but still a disappointment because folks were very, very optimistic leading up to the midterms. And look, I just want to say that where I'm at with this now. So I view myself as a conservative independent. And if it's Trump against any Democrat, I'm going to vote for Trump. So Trump just announced that he's running for president in 2024. If it's Trump versus any Democrat, I'm voting for him. But my position now is, look, if it's Trump versus Ron DeSantis, I am all in on Ron DeSantis. I think he's going to be a much more effective leader. And he just comes across in this post as really a narcissist. So I'll read part of what he said here, right? Now Ron DeSanctimonious is playing games. The fake news asked him if he's running for president if Trump runs, and he says, I'm only focused on the governor's race. I'm not looking into the future. Well, in terms of loyalty and class, that's not really the right answer. This is a disgrace. Like, this is a disgrace. You're a politician. The man basically said, nah, not really interested. I'm only focused on the governor's race, not looking into the future. But Ron is expected by Donald to kiss the ring. So just not acceptable behavior. I think that Donald Trump attacking his own, this friendly fire, this wild stuff makes him look very weak. It makes him look like he's an insecure and pathetic loser. So this is critical enough, and it's a shift in tone. We're used to Donald Trump fighting the bad guy, so to speak. We're used to him going after the Democrats and the fake news media and all the swamp and all that other stuff, right? The people that we generally don't like, the globalists, the people who don't want the border to be secure, et cetera, criminals, right? Drug traffickers. We're used to him talking all kind of stuff about them. It's not cool when he starts going after his own side, and when he's playing these childish games that really reveal him, sadly, to be potentially more of a narcissist than a patriot. You never want your narcissism to override your patriotism, and that's what I fear has been happening to him. Okay, so with that, let's get into the actual midterms themselves. So I already kind of gave you the teaser, and some of the highlights would have been, not only did Ron DeSantis overperform wildly by like 20 points in Florida, but Lee Zeldin actually overperformed as well in New York. So I was optimistic about him, if you recall, in past weeks. He did a great job. He did lose his race, but he performed better than any GOP member in decades. And I think every single House seat from New York went red, and many counties in New York went red as well. So good on him. What I think could be valuable in this is I almost want to tell kind of a tale of two counties, if you would, like a reference to Tale of Two Cities. So there's a Maricopa County, and then we're going to look at this place called Harris County in Texas, because I think that Texas actually got sort of a lack of attention. Harris County, like both on the left and the right, it's been surprisingly quiet. I haven't seen anybody make videos about Harris County. But let's just do a little comparison, okay? So Maricopa County, on election day, it was a heck of a way to start the election day. A bunch of machines just started breaking. So it was something like issues at 60 vote centers, 20% of poll sites. Machines just started going down. And the issue is expected to have affected about 17,000 ballots in Maricopa County. And that's an interesting figure, because if you look at the governor race in Arizona between Katie Hobbs and Kari Lake, the difference here is, 18,000, right? Now, granted, all 17,000 won't be for Kari Lake, but when you are able to quantify 17,000, how many do you think? So I'm going to assume that this 17,000 are just the people who tried to vote and couldn't, right? How many more tried to vote but never made it to trying to put their ballot into the machine? They just said, oh my gosh, look at this line, the machines are broken, and they walked away. I imagine it can be multiple times this amount. It could be tens of thousands of people, right? Who just, went from polling center to polling center and just couldn't cast their vote. And one of the sad things that happened is that I guess the same day there was a lawsuit filed asking for the the vote timing to be extended by a few hours in Maricopa County as a result of this, and a judge actually denied that request, which is incredible to me. Can you imagine? Hey, Maricopa County, can we have a couple extra hours because your voting machines were down? People waited for 3 hours and in some cases still couldn't vote, which is just absurd, third world country type of stuff. And need I remind everybody that it's Katie Hobbs who is overseeing the elections in Arizona, oddly enough, despite her name being on the ballot. So there's reason to believe that some of this might have even been intentional, not lack of preparedness, let's say. So that's the whole situation in Arizona. So far, I've seen no meaningful action. Beyond some initial complaints and please put your name down if you experience an issue. There's been no statewide cry or even countywide cry from elected officials to do something about it. So let's flip over now to Harris County in Texas. So Harris County GOP leaders claim voting issues on November 8th election could be intentional. So this one was interesting. It seems to have affected 20 voter machines in Harris County, and very strangely, 19 of them were noted to be in heavy Republican voter populations or strongholds. And it's been interesting here because there's been action taken. There's been, calls for investigation. I'll just kind of go down the sort of Twitter thread here. This is Harris County GOP. Greg Abbott, the governor of Texas, he himself is like, look, I'm calling on the Harris County District Attorney to investigate the possibility of criminal conduct during the November election. Right. And so this DA, Kim Ogg, is launching an investigation into that county's issues. There's been press conferences. Let's just go down the list. Kudos to attorney Andy Taylor on his lawsuit against the elections administrator Clifford Tatum earlier today. Right. Suing Harris County and its elections administrator. Right. There's like actual movement to really get to the bottom of this issue and to figure out what happened. Republican leaders are considering filing a lawsuit against the Harris County elections administrator after claiming voter suppression. Right. So it's just very interesting to me. I just find the willpower between Harris County and Maricopa County to be just wildly kind of different in day and night. So it says something about kind of where we are. And more broadly, though, just stepping back from the midterm situation, there seems to be a strategic difference nowadays. So one of the folks I was following for the election night and the whole election week, really, was Charlie Kirk. And he made an interesting comment. So he was one of the ones who was like all in on, Kari Lake's going to win. She's going to win. The math doesn't lie. Everyone was saying this, but he was probably the biggest proponent. It's just math. And then he basically acknowledged, so look, there are certain assumptions in our model that we didn't take into account, but he's really getting to a deeper issue, which is what he calls illegal ballot harvesting. He says here, the Rubicon has been crossed. I don't like it, but it's time to win. We will build the most sophisticated and aggressive legal ballot harvesting operation in America and never let this garbage happen again. And then Jack Posobiec comes across and says, we have become harvesters of ballots. So really interesting. In my opinion, this is a shame and kind of a disaster, right? And the reason for that is what Charlie says in one of his subsequent tweets, which is, look, I miss politics where the better arguments and the hardest working candidates won elected office. Now it's a matter of which political machine can capture the most ballots in a 30-day window. So be it. We will now have to be the left at that game, right? So what he's saying is, look, it's not about electing the best candidates, giving the most compelling arguments, winning over the hearts and minds of the population. Nah, that's not really it. And you've seen this, mass turnout for Trump rallies, no one going to Biden rallies. Dr. Oz, he's actually able to formulate sentences. John Fetterman basically can't. He's brain dead, but yet Fetterman still wins handedly. So there's a situation in which, debates, right? Kari Lake tried to debate Katie Hobbs. She very slightly refused all the way, but still seemed really confident for some reason. that it's going to work out in her favor, oddly enough. And what they've gotten good at is all the fundamentals. There's a difference between a voter and a ballot, right? And how are ballots being counted? How are they being tabulated? How are they being adjudicated? How does curing and fixing your ballot work? All these different things. What batches are there, and how are those batches being processed? What are the drop-off locations for ballots, and the sort of the procedures and protocols around that? There's a ton of sort of blocking and tackling kind of gamesmanship that pertains to ballots that it seems like the GOP is completely behind, the ball on, that they don't have any idea how to do this. So now we're playing catch up. Frankly, we should have learned our lesson for this back in 2020, but it seems like we haven't. And I'm almost reminded of like the 90s NBA versus like the modern day. There's this website, hoopshabit.com. They're basically saying, look, a lot of the greats from the 90s wouldn't be able to succeed in today's environment. The game has changed. The game of basketball has changed. John Stockton was gifted with a pick and roll powerhouse by the name of Karl Malone. Not taking anything away from Stockton because he's a great passer, but anyone who knows how his career would have gone if he would have ever played alongside, if he would have never played alongside Malone. Being so dependent on the pick and roll in today's NBA wouldn't be the worst thing, but teams wouldn't be able to stop a point guard without elite athleticism. So he wasn't a super athlete, is what they're saying. He had one trick, and he was extremely good at it, which is the pick and roll to Karl Malone. That's what he did day and night, and it won him many, 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 many games. But he was a one-trick pony. And they're saying in today's league with higher athleticism and different rules and different play styles and all the rest, he wouldn't be able to survive, right? And that's kind of how it is right now between the GOP and the Democrats. The GOP is John Stockton, They're good at a few things, and that's all they can do. And we're up against LeBron James, right? It's a whole different league. How well can you flop? How well can you flop? Get those calls, get those easy points. That's the game now. It's still called basketball, still called NBA, but fundamentally it is day and night, and we're just too slow to adjust apparently. Last thing I'll mention beyond just kind of ballot harvesting game is really around fundraising. Apparently we sucked at this as well, this cycle, and so that also really hampered us. GOP leadership, Mitch McConnell, even Trump really did a terrible job at allocating funds in an intelligent manner. Okay, so this one is going to go to S tier because we're talking about the midterms and all the shenanigans that went on with it. So next thing we got to talk about is the Great Replacement Theory. So I'll just hit this one really quick. Chuck Schumer, Senate Majority Leader, he says just the other day, we have a population that is not reproducing on its own with the same level that it used to. The only way we're going to have a great future is if we welcome immigrants, get a path to citizenship for all 11 million of them. And this is accurately noted as the Great Replacement laid out in the open for all to see. Why don't we encourage our own citizens to have children and families instead of encouraging abortion? So I 100% agree with this John Paul Jones character. When we say something, the allegation from the left is, oh, that's a wild conspiracy theory. And then time goes on, facts come out, and they're like, oh, the left is like, okay, you're right. But here's why it's a good thing. That's just how it is, man. That's just how it is. And they trial run everything, by the way. So this happened in New York State first. They tried to give non-citizens the right to vote. That was eventually struck down by a judge. But that doesn't mean that their strategy changes. They want they want the young instead of the old, and they want non-citizens to take over the spot of their sort of like current Democratic base. If they can't rely on black people anymore, because a lot of them, especially in Florida, went GOP, especially black men, if they don't really trust the J.D. Vance type of white person, who comes from humble beginnings. They need a new base to really tap into. Right now, their biggest base has been single women. Apparently, they were a huge component of their success. But that can only last for so long. What if those single women decide to get married and have children, and their politics change, and they don't want to abort? Well, they need somebody else to kind of have in their back pocket here. So interesting to see this kind of unfold. I'm going to put that in the A tier category. I want to see what kind of debate this sparks and what response Tucker Carlson in particular would have to this, because he's been one of the main people accosted by the left as being a pusher of the great replacement theory idea. So I would love to hear his reaction when it comes. Last thing for today is Marjorie Taylor Greene. So what you need to know is that the House and the Senate recently passed a bill to really like nationally codify gay marriage and mixed race marriages. Now that's the allegation on the surface. The reality is, guess what? Gay marriage and mixed race marriages are illegal already. So what are they really up to? So somebody named Cambry on Twitter, she's like, hey, I got confused over this same-sex marriage bill. I thought it was already legal. My cousin's gay and he got married years ago, so I looked into the bill. It will allow the IRS to revoke the tax exempt status of churches that hold fast to traditional marriage. So, and MJT is like, well done. And that's exactly what's going on. So just kind of sharing this as kind of an interesting cultural war, missile that seems to be headed to Joe Biden's death to sign into effect at some point, because it's going to be a nasty one. So if you're a cake shop and you don't want to have a sort of a gay wedding cake, well, they can come after you. If you're a church and you don't want to officiate like a marriage, they can come after you. Now you're going to get taxed up the wazoo, right? If you're an adoption center or a foster care provider and you don't want to accommodate for those with that belief or that lifestyle, we're going to come after you, right? And we should have known this was coming. One of the preludes was when they were arresting people for protesting abortion centers, and when they were allowing Antifa to go to adoption centers following the overturn of Roe v. Wade and just like bash and break everything. So we kind of knew what their agenda was and what DOJ was after. The same DOJ, by the way, that was apparently pressured into not investigating FTX, by the way, just to bring that back full circle. Moving this one to the A tier as well. Thanks for listening to today's rundown. If you liked what you heard, please comment, like, and subscribe, and I'll catch you next time.